Hi, my name is Bianca Vasquez, and I'm doing my final presentation on Huntington's disease. George Huntington was born and raised in East Hampton, New York. Born into a family of general practitioners, Huntington began his academic career at an advantage. In 1871, Huntington began his medical training at Columbia University. After medical school, Huntington returned back to his local community and began working in general practice. Soon after, Huntington began to track dementia and chorea, a disorder where a person moves randomly, uncontrollably, and involuntarily. By using the case notes from his father and grandfather, Huntington discovered that the trait was autosomal dominant. However, 40 years before Huntington made the connection, in Sydesland, Norway, a Johann Christian Lund was the first to record the disease. Lund had called it Sedeshul Rika. Lund had only made case notes from the disease and believed that Rika was a local phenomenon. Lund's description led for a unique nickname, dancing mania, due to the sporadic movements caused by chorea. Lund's publishings were not published in English, and any information he observed was reserved for locals in the area. George Huntington's extensive research and his publishings earned him the credit for the disease. Huntington's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder, meaning over time the disease gets progressively worse. The epidemiology of Huntington's is Europeans and North Americans. Huntington's is normally diagnosed in a person's 30s. In very, very rare cases, a juvenile form presents between puberty and age 20. The prognosis for Huntington's is terminal. As the brain cells begin to break down, the body is unable to fight off infections, maintain homeostasis activity, or support life-maintaining functions. The most common cause of death in a person with Huntington's is pneumonia and injury from falling. Huntington's disease is caused by chromosome 4. To be exact, it's on D4S10. The chromosome is missing due to a de novo deletion. De novo is when the mutation occurs sporadically. The Huntington mutation is considered autosomal dominant, meaning that the mutation itself occurs on one of the sex chromosomes, and one copy of the gene is enough to make a person affected. People with Huntington's have a 50% chance of passing on their gene to their offspring. So, if the gene presents a family history, how is it passed on? Why did evolution not eradicate it? Well, as cold as it seems, here's where we have to remember the definition of our biological purpose, and that is to produce fit and viable offspring. By definition, we are producing offspring that are able to make it to sexual maturity and reproduce. Since the disease normally doesn't present itself until mid-30s, it gives the carrier ample opportunity to reproduce. Historically, even as knowledge of Huntington's disease arose, smaller and impoverished communities were often looked over, allowing for the disease to be passed on. Because the chances of a family knowing that they had Huntington's versus regular chorea was low, even if a parent didn't have it, they still could pass on the gene. Huntington eventually moved away from the disease to pursue other interests, but had hopes that science, which has accomplished such wonders through the never-tiring devotion of its votaries, may yet overturn and overturn it, until it is laid open to the light of day. Treatment at the time varied. In 1909, William Batson confirmed the pattern of hereditary and dubbed it Mendelian autosomal dominant. Pressures from government and societies led to Charles B. Davenport to become the director of the prestigious biological laboratory at Cold Spring Harbor, New York. He was the founder of the eugenics office and an early proponent of Mendelianism. In 1911, Davenport hired Elizabeth B. Munsey to undertake the first large-scale pedigree of families with Huntington's disease in New York, going back to nearly 12 generations. The results made Davenport call for more restrictive immigration. In 1932, Percy R. Vesey became part of the Huntington's disease crusade. Building on Munsey's pedigrees, Vesey traced the genealogy of one of his own patients back to her 17th century New England immigrant ancestors, identifying three married couples from the English village of Burrs as the most likely progenitors of Huntington's disease. A fun fact is that those families were actually condemned of witchcraft, most likely due to the chorea and their sporadic movements and being considered possessed by the devil. In 1945, James V. Neal, a renowned geneticist, argued the most hesitant of us to venture into the field of negative eugenics would probably agree upon the desirability of the detection and exclusion of such immigrants on the same grounds that the United States Public Health Service now excludes those infected with certain contagious diseases. Essentially, there was no relief provided to patients, only steps to prevent their reproduction. Today's technology helps provide some relief, but still the only way to prevent Huntington's is through in vitro fertilization and genetically testing the embryos before they are implanted to make sure they do not carry the gene. There is no cure currently available and only relief for those who have it, and in hopes of delaying the inevitable.